Oh, we're finally back to Friday night.
Yes, it is Friday night and we are back. The best hour of the week is about to start.
That's right.
Oh, it's so good to see you and to be talking on a Friday night again. So, congratulations on your 70.3.
Yeah, you know what? Indian Wells, I signed up again.
You did.
I signed up for 2022 and
Did they have to twist your arm or did they give you what would they? I'm
no,
just teasing.
I enjoyed the course. I enjoyed the camping out ahead of time too. That was prime location right there.
Yeah.
But when I went to the race this year, I really had it in my mind I was just going to complete versus compete, and for a variety of reasons. But and then you and I talked off air about this, and I said, I'm going to really go and just sort of recon the race. Believe me, I tried as hard as I could on
Of
the day.
course.
But my fitness was not that great going into the race, and so my mindset was much more trying to take the pressure off of competing and just trying to take it in and do a solid job. And so it was good. The water was perfect. It was actually refreshing. Got out and the bike course was
I saw some people's Garmin's and it looked like it was 62, 63 on the watches.
I didn't check my watch temperature, but they were saying pretty consistently for the couple days leading in that it was right around 60, just above
But maybe
60.
it was under someone's wetsuit, like the couple that I
Okay,
saw. It could be, right? So that temperature could maybe be 61, 62.
that's right. That's right.
But still, I mean, that's for that time of year at that race, that's probably one of the warmest I've heard of, right?
Yeah, and I think it was, and I didn't wear the neoprene cap. Just went with the normal.
I mean, were your hands pretty cold and feet pretty cold
No,
or?
not at all. Like I
Okay.
said, it was the first buoy, second buoy. At that point, it actually felt refreshing.
Okay.
It was quite nice, and so enjoyed the swim. Had a really very reasonable swim for me, and really felt good. Bike ride was fun. It was flat, so it's a little different than Vegas, but and the wind was blowing in the right direction for the first half and wrong direction for the second half. But it was what the neat thing. Well, the important thing of that is I was trying not to get in my mind that I was going to double my time to the halfway mark because I could tell that there was a pretty good tailwind. And I had checked the wind finder the night before, and I knew it was going to be a tailwind for the first third of the race, and then fighting it on the way back. And but overall, bike ride was good. Roads decent. There's some
Was
bumpy.
it chip seal or what's the surface?
It was a mixture, and the worst parts were really the intersections, uh, and the road was just there were real pot marks and potholes to try to get around. Uh, but overall, it was decent road.
Right.
I ran 95 psi, which is probably okay. Maybe it could have gone a little bit lower for those roads. Uh, but yeah, then hit the run, and I knew the run was going to be my liability, and but
Your splits were pretty good, like pretty like they weren't like erratic by any stretch of
yeah,
the.
no, thanks. And actually, my goal was to run the entire run, and I ran the entire run. I didn't walk any of the hills. I didn't walk any of the aid stations, and I just wanted to be consistent and have a good pace, and I did that. And the most important thing was I had no GI problems.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Because that I know that's been a battle for you, and it was hot, and it tends to be a battle for you when it's hot.
yeah.
So, what do you think it was?
I'm not 100% sure, and unfortunately, I did not take the continuous blood glucose monitor or the core temp pill, which I wish I had that.
Oh, I should have gave you my core temp monitor that you could just
Uh,
warn.
I wish I had those data to look at, but I don't. But I think it probably has to do with the even pacing of the entire course because you don't have those spurts of high intensity to get up over a hill and then down intensity. It was a very even effort throughout the whole day. And I do wonder if that might be where I'm getting myself in trouble. So I'm uh, getting too high of intensity on some hilly courses. So
On the bike or the run?
probably starting on the bike, but
Yeah.
definitely on the run as well. Yeah.
It would be really interesting to look at, number one, your power analysis on the races you've struggled and seeing like your variability index
Yeah. Yeah.
to see if that actually is a thing. And then um, maybe one of these days we should, put a power meter on your shoes and
Yeah.
actually see variability index while running.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of triathletes actually, if they were to look at their variability index on a run, especially on a hilly course, I think we all tend to run the uphills with a little bit too much gusto,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And not recognizing that, we go into that a little bit of that anaerobic, more anaerobic. I know we talked about this before. It's a sliding scale, a little bit too much anaerobic for short amounts of time. And then what does that do to the gastrointestinal system, even if it's 30 seconds or a minute, where you get to that closer to that lactic threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't know the answer. And then it's just an idea. I listened to or read that book or listened to that book, The Athlete's Gut, and that was one of the things they were actually mentioning was fluctuations in intensity.
Yeah, and I have not had a chance to go back and look at the other races because that's what I like you. That's exactly what popped in my head is looking at how much the power varied, and so that variability index is actually a good thing to go back and take a look at. The run is a punchy course. It's on a golf course, but it wasn't terrible. Hawaii 70.3 was a little bit more punchy,
Oh, really?
steeper hills, and Hawaii 70.3 had some really steep downhills that I even struggled with and wanted to walk some or did walk some because I was worried of just not having enough muscular strength. That's what we're going to get towards that.
Yeah.
But the Indian Wells course was reasonable. It was had some good hills in there to keep it honest, but yeah. So I signed up again, and
Awesome.
we'll try it again next year and see if I can compete a little better. And because next year would be a qualifier for Finland.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get a go because I've already got my ticket and
Nice.
I'd like you to come with me. That'd be a lot of fun.
Oh, that would be. Let's hope the world is open again at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's talk about strength, John.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We have been doing this for how long now? Over a year and a half. We've been having these regular Friday conversations, and we've talked about strength here and there. We talked about blood flow restriction training. We've talked about some stuff with injury. We did the glute activation stuff, which had some strength associated with it. But we've kind of been dancing around this issue for 90 episodes or so.
Hmm.
And, it's a very interesting thing when you talk about triathlon and strength training. And, and when you start to look at the evidence, the anecdotes, man, it's up in the air.
Well, it's hard to find a professional triathlete who is not doing strength training.
Oh, I disagree with you.
Oh yeah?
There
Okay.
was a survey at the Collins Cup.
Oh yeah?
Less than half is
Okay. Well,
formal strength training. And
that's
these are, the Collins Cup is the, supposedly the best long distance triathletes in the world.
yeah. Yeah.
And so, they came up with, it was less than half. It was done on the Global Triathlon Network or one of those podcasts or shows. And they actually were talking about specific people and who did it and who didn't. And some dabbled, right? And some were, yeah, I do it in the off season. I don't do it during the on season. Then you're like, well, in a professional triathlete, when's the off season?
Hmm.
So it's hit and miss. I think it's almost as hit and miss as it is in the age groupers.
Yeah, okay, I like that. That's good information, but at the same time, I'll say it is very common, maybe I'll be more broad,
Yep.
to get advice on training programs that include strength training.
Oh, I completely agree. And And I would also contend that when you look at pretty much any book on how you train for triathlon,
Yeah.
there's a piece on it on strength and conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when we go back and look at the actual evidence
Mm-hmm.
for strength training in triathlon, it's lacking.
Well, I'll tell you, this semester I teach that course, Physiology of Endurance Performance.
Yep.
And I have all the students do an individual project. And I let them pick their project. And I give them a list of projects, and I do let them double up, that is more than one person can do a topic. And this semester, I probably had about 5 do the topic on concurrent training for strength in endurance.
Yep.
And every one of them starts off with the idea, oh, we know this works. And pretty much every other presentation, I just finished watching them all today. They do a 3-minute presentation and they review 2 papers on the topic. And pretty much every one of them presented information where there was no change in endurance metrics like VO2 max.
Yep.
But there's changes in strength training metrics. And the tendency is still to conclude that strength training improves endurance performance. And so it's this weird sort of phenomena that on one hand, it makes sense. On one hand, well, it makes sense if you do strength training that would help exercise in general. But on the other hand, it's very hard to actually find the right data that shows that strength training improves endurance performance. Now, our content curator did find a paper though.
Yep. Yep. But I would also contend, John, that when we look at the evidence, there is, and your students found it, I'm sure,
Yeah.
good evidence to support that it improves running economy, improves cycling economy, improves swimming economy.
Mm-hmm.
But my contention has been for a long time, does that translate to triathlon and getting from the start to the finish
Mm-hmm.
any faster, right? And part of my alter ego is to say, okay, I would love to add 2 strength training days per week.
Mm-hmm.
But we were just talking off air about how many hours we work. Okay, so let's say I only work 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to train already 15 hours a week. Oh yeah, and I got to cook Marie breakfast every day, and I got to cook dinner every day. Where's the time? Oh, and I have to recover. So is there enough evidence to say that I'm going to get from A to B, start to finish, any faster, and I'm going to spend 2 extra hours a week?
Well, okay, so now you're speaking to one of the papers we reviewed for this, which is barriers to strength training.
Yep.
And one of the number one barriers is perceived time to include strength training.
Yeah.
And that's a problem with triathletes, because you're like, well, if I do strength training, what do I need to give up in order to do the strength training?
Yeah. And the give up, when this can go back to our relationship issue, right? A talk we had 3 months ago, is the give up 2 less walks with my wife at night, like where we go for a nice stroll around the neighborhood. I'm not willing, maybe I'm not willing to give that up because I know that's important for our relationship. It is difficult. That being said, I actually am a fan of strength training. Like, here's my TRX. I've got a full set of weights there. I've got a Pilates. I've got a hex bar. I've got medicine balls. Like, I do strength training. Okay. But I'm very careful that I don't do too much and I don't let it take away too much time. And I try really hard, and this is careful that I don't do too much. And I really try to do the exercises I feel like have the best bang for the buck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do a lot of fluff exercises when I do it. And, but you're right, there are some big barriers to entry. So other than perceived time, what are the other barriers that we came across?
Oh, I got to bring the paper up now. Sorry.
Well, number one barrier is not knowing what to do.
Oh yeah, and actually that I just pulled it up, and that was it. It's just knowledge of what to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's another thing, right? Is if you were to find a really good strength and conditioning coach in Las Vegas, and there are some, would they really understand how to implement strength and conditioning for triathlon into the triathlon training program? And would a triathlon coach have the knowledge and strength and conditioning to implement it in? So that's a huge barrier to entry.
Yeah. Well,
Because nobody wants to do something that's not going to help them or something that potentially could hurt them.
yeah, no, I love this because the paper is titled "Strength Training in Long Distance Triathletes: Barriers and Characteristics" by Lucan and colleagues.
Yep.
This was 2021, so very current paper. And
Yep.
the other thing to your point that I thought was really interesting in this paper is that all the professional athletes that they checked with all had coaches for strength training routines, whereas the age group athletes did not.
Yep. And that's a big thing, right? So, I'll just give you another example. So last night, I'm swimming, and we had a really hard session on Tuesday swimming. And last night, man, I was struggling. I had a pretty tough week of training. And, this morning I was supposed to do strength work. It's kind of in my schedule. I was like, I'm done. Like, I didn't have any energy left. And today it turned into a rest day. And it's like, what did I give up? Like, did I give up once again, adding more? And I'm going to, take another piece here. Am I going to add more stress to an already stressful week? Because work has been really stressful this week as well. And so the first thing that goes is going to be strength. And I hate to say that, it's going to be the strength training.
Yeah. And the question is whether or not it should. And this is what is.
And I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. It's really, really hard to separate that because if you're not running, and we talk about specificity, are you getting the run training benefit? But with strength training, you may be able to still get a training response, but it's hard to tease out one for one what is going on. So what's interesting in the current concurrent research, concurrent training programs, if you want strength gains, you don't want to include endurance training,
Right.
because endurance training does interfere with strength gains. But the converse is strength training doesn't necessarily negatively influence endurance performance. And there are some metrics that we've seen that will get better with strength training.
John, I think we should repeat that because I think it's a really important thing, right? If you are a gym guy and you want to get as strong as you possibly can, right? You want to do max squat and like that's your goal. Doing endurance training will hinder that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know that, but concurrent training, so doing both at the same time, does not necessarily have the same negative effect on the endurance side.
That's right.
Because I think that's been a thing for a long time. It's like, oh, I don't want to do strength training because it'll negatively impact my endurance, and the evidence isn't that strong for that.
No, that's right. It seems pretty consistent that it won't hurt your endurance training. And there's a couple of different experimental models that they do where when you do two types of training, you have to equate on something. Sometimes it's volume, sometimes it's on intensity. And there's been a few different experimental models on that. And it seems to consistently come out that it doesn't make things worse for your. So now you got to look at, your specialty, injury prevention, if there's some benefit to that. And, a lot of these studies, they're not looking at, iron distance type of endurance performance. They're looking at, maybe a 20-minute, maybe a 60-minute ride, or maybe a time to exhaustion, which is not an easy protocol to actually do.
Yeah.
And so, we got to keep in mind that not all these experimental models are going to apply to the types of events that we're doing.
John, you're right on the nail on this one, because, and let's go into the athletic training injury prevention side. So this question comes up, and my students ask this question of me too. They say, okay, well, everyone kind of thinks that strength training will reduce injury or reduce injuries. But are we not adding more stress? Because if we're talking about, injury happening because of adding too much stress, a chronic injury, is strength training not adding stress? And do tendons not respond slower than the musculature? And tendons are where we tend to have the injury. And I love these conversations that my students bring up because they're actually thinking about, like, these are big picture things and not just accepting the fact that strength training will make you have a an impact on not getting injured.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There is a model that would say strength training could potentially exacerbate injury to somebody that, especially if you're already on that edge of overtraining.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's a tricky one. It really is, and I don't think we have enough information in the literature to say, this person's been training for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at this load per week, and now we're going to say, hey, let's add 2 strength training sessions per week. And now they were on the edge. And now we potentially could take them over the edge.
Yeah.
But we're doing this in the guise of injury prevention.
No, I love it. And what's interesting is we dove pretty deep into strength training, but we haven't defined what strength training is, because one of the areas of research that I've done is running in the water. And running in the water has been shown to benefit endurance performance. Well, one of the hypotheses we've had all along is that running in the water is almost more like strength training, because no matter which direction you're moving, you're always going to have resistance. It's not strength training, like a gym strength training, but that's the other part of when we start talking about strength training for endurance events, running in particular. You start looking at more functional type movements and
Yep.
more what we would refer to as like 3D type of movements or multiplanar type of movements.
Yep.
But that again, that's another variation of this strength training regime, and how do you test that out? Because it's
No,
not easy to
I love it.
not easy to to standardize all the experiments with the type of exercises that they're using.
And so they'll ask you the next level question that my students ask me usually is, are we doing strength training to increase performance or to decrease injury? Because those are 2 completely different things.
Yeah.
Right? So for the runner, or even a cyclist, it's a well-known, almost accepted thing that people's lateral hip musculature, in particular their gluteus medius, so their hip abductors, that brings your legs out, are weak in general, because we're doing exercise always forward in the forward and back plane, right? We call this the sagittal plane. So I can get better at the sagittal plane if I do more sagittal plane exercises. So if I do squats and lunges and that stuff, well, that's going to maybe increase my performance, but it's going to keep loading the things that are already strong.
Mm-hmm.
Where the lateral side pieces are weak. But if I increase my lateral strength, it's really not going to add power to the bike, right? Or make me run with more power or more strength. So I contend that there's 2 different ways to look at strength training. And one is, do we want to kind of balance ourselves out from this, what we're doing, or do we want to do it for performance?
Mm-hmm.
Or can we do both? And now I'm saying, okay, instead of 3 or 4 exercises twice a week, now it might be 8. And now it's more time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because strength training takes time. People don't recognize that. To do it well, you actually need to actually do your exercise, have rest. Do your exercise, have rest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not enough rest to actually do something, right? Like between your sets, let's say you're doing 2, 3, 4 minutes between. It's not enough time to actually do anything. It's not like you can, go do a project or whatever. Maybe, maybe what I should do is do 1 email response and then go back and do my next set. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
On the type of strength training regime, or
if you're going to do it would you contend it's for performance, or more important for performance, or more important for injury prevention?
So, okay, personally, I would do it for both. I know that's a cheap answer, but if add in strength training, I want to do it because I want to go faster. And if I add in strength training, I'm also doing it with the mindset that, oh, this is going to help protect me. It's going to help mitigate the risk of overuse injury.
Yep. And we'd love it to be both, right? Like, I think the right answer is exactly what you gave me. And I think that's what most athletes, well, I don't want to characterize athletes, because, I've been dealing with athletes and injury my entire career. The number one rule in athletes is none of them want to do injury prevention until they're injured.
Yeah, right.
That's the number one rule. So it really is, for the most part, performance until you're injured, and then it's injury prevention. And then you're not injured anymore, and then it's for performance.
Yeah. Wow. It's a tough thing, but going back to even talking about training programs in strength training. I mean, there's even some advocates to do strength training throughout your taper.
Yep.
Right up until your race, because you're still able to stress the muscle, but not in a way that's going to put you at risk of injury during the event. So I don't know. It's a tough topic.
No, it's super tough. So, the number one piece of advice I would give anyone that wants to get into this or do it is you really, 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 really need to work with a professional. Mm-hmm. And have someone that really knows what they're doing work with you on your strength and conditioning plan, that understands the demands that you're already under. Mm-hmm. Because most people have no clue with what you're doing. Let's say you're doing 10 to 12 hours a week of triathlon. People can't even wrap their head around that. Oh, you in people's minds, 25 miles on the bike and 100 miles on the bike, if you're not a cyclist, there's no difference. Right? Oh, you ride a long ways. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Or you run 10 miles a week or 25 miles a week, same thing. There's no difference in most people's mind to what that is, unless you've actually walked a mile in these people's shoes. Mm-hmm. So finding that right person is, in my opinion, super, super important. And and the problem with this stuff is you can Googleize all this stuff really quickly and get a lot of opinions and a lot of magic bullets of do this exercise, and it's difficult. Mm-hmm. It's super difficult. And I'll add another caveat. Most of the age group triathletes that we know and that are in our circle all have concomitant injuries, right? They've got a back problem. They have had a knee surgery. They've had hip problems. They've torn their calf. So then that adds another piece, a little nuance to it, mm-hmm. that only a real professional that has a really strong understanding of the biomechanics of triathlon and of strength and conditioning can truly, in my opinion, help.
Well, and how the athlete ages, and menopausal versus premenopausal females, and strength training through the menstrual cycle. I mean, these are things we talked about with Stacy Sims. I mean, yeah, there's a lot that goes into this. And again, I'll point back to that paper we looked at, and that none of the professionals were doing strength training without a coach. Yep. So they were relying on someone else. And the tricky part, and you talk about the load, the tricky part is coming up what a strength training load is on you. With Training Peaks, Strava, I mean, Garmin, they all have algorithms that if you go for a run, a bike, or a swim, that they put a number on that load, and it's probably a pretty good number. But strength training is a little bit different, and so it's not as easy to figure out what that stress is. And you and I have talked all the time, but you've got to manage that stress.
Well, and then we'll add another piece. One of the issues we have with a lot of triathletes is energy availability, which we've talked about. Mm-hmm. The amount of energy it takes to do some heavy lifting, mm-hmm. is crazy. I was looking at some of the stuff like, doing 3 sets of 6 squats. So not much, so 18, but heavy, right? Like, yep. 85% could basically completely deplete your glycogen. Right. And okay, so let's do that. And then I'm going to go for a run. Mm-hmm. Now I'm glycogen depleted. before I even step out the door. And people don't think of that, right? And that, once again, that's where you need to have somebody in your corner that understands not just load, but also kilojoules, right?
Yeah, right.
And caloric needs.
Mhm.
Because if you add, let's say, once again, you're that 10 to 12 hour a week triathlete, and you add 2 more hours of strength training,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do now to increase your fueling even further?
Right.
So there's a lot of moving pieces.
There is. All
You
right, so
know,
I got to read a couple of comments because it
Yep.
gets a little bit to that. So Max says, my favorite subject to chat on. So he hasn't commented after that. So I'm waiting.
Oh,
He's loading up right now.
he
So
is just loading up. And the best part is obviously you and I have been mentors to Max in the past, and he's been great with us as well. And this is his business,
yeah,
right?
that's right. I've learned from
That
him.
we're talking about. And I'm sure for those of you that are in Las Vegas and you want to have someone that really knows what they're doing with strength and conditioning and triathlon, Max is a good resource. I'll give him a little plug here.
He's been big into functional movement, and yeah, so I've learned a lot from him. All right, so then David writes, great topic, all relevant things that have been swirling around in my head. I've been hesitant to add strength training because I don't want to have jelly legs for the bike and the run training, which is what you're speaking to now. But know that I'm giving up some power and potential injury prevention.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it comes down to, like, once again, like the research is so limited, right? So I would say, what would be better to do, and I'm just throwing something out, a 3-week block of VO2 work on the bike with heavy work, right? Or 3 weeks of adding strength and conditioning.
And we don't have, we have no research to be able to answer that question. So
No,
it's too hard of a question.
it's too hard of a question.
Yeah.
So then the next thing I would say, to David is maybe you do an N of 1 experiment, right? Where you're like, spend 5 weeks, 6 weeks, but do like an FTP test, or do a Wingate test, or a 5-minute power test, or something on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Then do one of those things. Do a power specific block on the bike. Do a strength specific block where you don't do that, and see where's the bang for the buck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once again, it's a slippery slope, and
it is.
And I think there's a lot of individual variability here, right? And that's something we talked about a few weeks ago, is that everyone's an individual with this.
Well, and this is where coaching really becomes important, because the work I do in the lab, that's research, and I'm not a coach. A coach has to bridge that gap between what the science is and the application, and working with athletes to see what's going to work, what's not going to work, because of what you're speaking to, the individuality of responses. And so this is the next question by David too, is recommendations of persons in town. And this is tough because, you do need to look at, I believe it's good to look at certifications. There's certified strength and conditioning specialist through NSCA. You've got, the coaching certifications, which do not require an academic background. CSCS requires some academic background. And so you can look at certifications like that, but you also have to look at the scope of work they do with athletes, because that is the art form. You do need to look at the individual and try to help that individual, versus, a lot of times our research designs, we're doing the group.
Yep. No, and I think you have to look way past certifications. And this is me talking. I'm a certified athletic trainer,
Yep.
licensed and certified, right? I know many licensed athletic trainers and certified athletic trainers that know nothing about endurance sports,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they've worked in football their entire life, or they've worked in wrestling, or whatever the case may be. And so the certification is one thing, but do they know, and have they worked with triathletes and other endurance athletes?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say specifically for this case, for triathletes, because I also really contend that working with runners is not working with triathletes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a lot of people do have experience working with runners, but you're dealing with, once again, we're dealing with 3 sports, and it's one sport, and it's get from A to B as fast as you can. And I also contend that if I was a single sport athlete or working with a single sport athlete, this is a no-brainer. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to add strength and conditioning in.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to do three different things.
Well, let's stick on the injury component of triathlon. And this was another, again, this is fresh in my head because I watched 63-minute videos yesterday and today. And all these videos were from students, incorporating the research into answering some question. And one of the questions had to do with the injury risk in participating in triathlons. And what's interesting is those injury rates really follow a run training program injury rate and type of injuries, because running is really, the most hazardous sport to overuse injuries. But triathletes, we tend to have a much lower volume of running than a single sport runner that you're mentioning as well. Single sport runner, 50 miles a week, is,
That's not a big week.
but for a triathlete, I mean, a lot, if you get over 20 miles a week, that could be a lot because you've got the time for the other two sports as well. And so the injury rates are there with triathlon, but they're usually they're going to follow the run training that someone's doing.
So once again, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. As someone that does some strength training, does strength training pose injury risk?
Oh, of course it does. And especially if you do, and this is again why professionals, pro triathletes, they use coaches, I'm sure, is because you need to do it correctly. You need to do the movement correctly, because otherwise you are putting a unique stress on a structure, and you may be isolating that stress so much on a one particular area that you could even cause an acute injury,
Yeah.
or an
No,
injury that could happen like that. So
completely agree. And then, I'm glad Max is watching because, I really think a lot of him. But one of the things that, I don't know if it was Max that said it or somebody around the time that I was at his place was talking about, there's no really bad exercise. And there's really even no bad technique of exercise. There's only bad load.
mm-hmm.
Right? So if you think about it, and then we go, let's not even think about a triathlete. Let's think about like a basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
What movement do they do consistently over and over and over again? Well, we don't know. It's multi-directional. You mentioned multi-directional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they are only doing squat and they're doing squat perfect, like textbook squatting, well, that protects them potentially or strengthens them in that exact plane, that exact way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say their feet are too wide, or they put more pressure on one leg than the other, or whatever fault they have in their squat.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the load is low enough, they're not at risk for injury.
Right.
The problem comes with bad technique and too high of a load, I would contend.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that. And
Yeah.
no, I think you're right. And so now you need to have that knowledge, which is again a barrier to doing strength training.
Yeah.
It's how do I walk into a facility? What do I do with that kettlebell that's in my garage? How do I use it correctly? And that's a barrier to doing strength training.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. And yeah, and John, I think this is the best part about our conversation is neither of us know the right answer here, right? And I think both of us, if we didn't have a job, well, once again, we'd be broken. We wouldn't be able to afford triathlon. But if we were independently wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to work, I think both of us would probably add more strength
Well,
training
and
into
again,
our
going back to that survey, the professional triathletes did not identify time as a
right.
barrier to strength training,
Yep.
because that's their job, and
Yep.
so it's not so then it becomes an important part of their routine. So let's see. I want to get to some of the exercises that you have.
Yep.
Before we do, I do want to mention this paper that Vernice, our content curator, sent to us on strength training improves exercise economy and triathletes during the simulated triathlon.
Yeah, this is a great paper.
It really is, and this is the exciting part, that they actually did demonstrate improvements in a variable which is really a good predictor of performance, and that's velocity at VO2 max.
Yep.
That's an important parameter because what a lot of the studies before, and I mentioned this, that I have done concurrent training, they've shown no change in VO2 max. Well, VO2 max by itself is not a good predictor of performance. And a lot of times, if you have a high VO2 max and you do a training program, you may not see much shifted in your VO2 max at all because it's already high.
Right.
If you want to show a training study works, you start with unfit people because they have the biggest potential to improve their VO2 max. So, but if you work with fit people, it's you may not see any change in VO2 max, but you can see a change in performance. And that performance is typically quantified by something like the velocity that you're running at VO2 max. And you want that to be higher, whether it's running or cycling, what have you. And so this study actually did a nice job of demonstrating that that athletes had almost a 4% increase in velocity at VO2 max following strength training.
So John, I get the same, I was really impressed by this research article, but, once again, I got to, let's talk about exactly what they did here, right? So they took two groups. They had an endurance group and then an endurance plus strength training group where they did 2 times a week strength training of 3 to 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps of how many exercises was it? 3 to 4 exercises. So 3 to 4 lower body and 1 upper body exercise per session. So 2 sessions of, let's say, 5 exercises. And which we end up seeing this ultimately happen. And it was a 12 weeks, right? 12 weeks, or 2 12-week periods.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, and what I would have loved to see in this study was, now to the endurance group, let's add an hour more of speed work running, or an hour more or something running, or an hour more of cycling.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because these people, they actually got 2 more hours basically of training per week.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's strength training, but I just, I'm just wondering, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, that's exactly what the challenge with this type of work is, because it's apples and oranges. And so when you add in strength training, you're taking away something else, or you've got to find how to make different groups equivalent.
Yeah, and they didn't do that in this group.
And it's not easy to do because of what you're talking about. Well, if I pull this out, I could add this in, but if I'm at it, it gets you get into
even still, I would rather them said, okay, we're going to replace 1 run and 1 bike, even if it's a recovery run and recovery bike per week, and then we're going to add in the strength training, so the hours are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do know that if you ride more, you become more efficient,
right?
And if you run more, you gain efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're right. Like this study did show improved running economy and cycling economy.
Yep.
Which is pretty awesome.
That is. Mm-hmm. All right. So now, even though the jury's still out, we know that strength training will not. Well, I feel pretty confident to say if you start training strength training, you're not going to get worse. Globally, okay.
I agree.
Not with the someone who goes and abuses strength training. I'm talking about doing the type of exercises that we're talking about here. But actually, that's what I want to get to is, well, what type of exercises? And you've got some ideas on this.
Yeah. So, I've been obviously bumping around this space for a long time. And I think that, this paper was great because they talked about 3 to 4 exercises 2 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed a significant improvement, right? And so I would contend, number 1 is let's not do too much. And number 2, the exercises we do, we want to have a high bang for our buck of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, this article did a nice job of of doing their reps and sets, because I also think that that's important, is there's a lot of variability out there in the literature about how much we should do. I think that, when you really get down to it, if you truly want to add strength, we're looking at 3 reps of about 5 or 6, or sorry, 3 sets of about 5 or 6 reps to just before failure. So what I mean by that is at the 6th one or 5th one, you could probably do one more, but you don't really want to gain strength. But I'd also add one more piece to that. And I know there's a lot of stuff happening here, but I'd add one more piece to that, is that's once you've become competent at the weight training skill that you're doing. Because remember, these are still skill based.
That's right.
And so you have to build up to that skill. So once again, I've spent a lot of time over the years coming up with what I think are kind of the bang for the buck exercises, and I'm more than happy to share them with people, but with the caveat of go see a professional first. I'm just giving you some ideas. I think I have 8 exercises. Once again, I wouldn't do all 8. I would pick maybe 4 of them, do them a couple times a week. And then as far as when to do them, the jury's out on that one too. Should I do them before? Should I do them after? I would contend doing, I would do them after a run. If it was the running, I might do them before cycling, because I'm not as concerned about the injury side of things, on being fatigued, but just be careful with these. But I would always say with these, seek out some guidance, but here's just some ideas. So we can kind of go through, and we have a PowerPoint that John's going to pull up. And then I think you linked to it on the Facebook page as well.
I've been quickly trying to figure out how to do that, and I can't add it as a,
okay, well, we can add it afterwards.
Yeah, we'll try to, we'll post it, at least an individual. Want me to go ahead and share it?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so this is actually probably my favorite. So a single leg RDL, or Romanian deadlift. So this is actually one that is in my regular routine, because I do it as part of my warm up for running. And I do it when it's a warm up for running, relatively lightweight. It's a hard exercise to do because it takes balance, but it really helps with that, the control on the hamstring eccentrically, which we talked about eccentrically before, but also it does a nice job of stabilizing the hips as you go. So this is definitely one that is in my toolbox for sure. So that's the first one.
All right, next one.
Okay, this is a split squat Bulgarian. What's it called? Bulgarian split squat. And there's 2 different versions here. There's the one on the left, and then the one on the right is actually banded. I really like the banded version of this. So the band, you can see, is coming across the body, and so you're actually trying to keep the knee just outside of the foot as you're going down. So that works the lateral side of the hip at the same time. This is one of my, once again, serious go-to exercises I like to do. And you'll probably notice actually on the first 3 of these are all single leg. I think that triathletes for the most part can get a lot of bang for their buck by doing single leg exercises rather than double leg, because we're doing running and cycling, which is one leg than the other. We're very rarely are we pushing with 2 legs at the same time, except for maybe pushing up the wall in a pool.
All right, good. I like this. I gotta add that one in.
Okay, this one's a crossover box step up. Now, I tried to come up with some things that were more like you could do at home, not necessarily at a gym. There's some that are going to be more at a gym. I like this one because you could just do it on a bench or a chair or something like that. And rather than doing a straight step up, you're actually crossing your body. And once again, we're strengthening the hamstrings, the glutes, but we're also strengthening the lateral stabilizers. So all 3 of these first ones are trying to answer 2 questions: increase performance and decrease injury.
Okay, I like that.
So this one is a hip thrust or a glute bridge. Two different names we use in this one. And so all you're doing here is, and there's two different ways you can do this. You can just put your feet on the ground, or you can put your feet on a bench. You just load up your hips and just push them forward. This is a kind of a bread and butter glute strengthening and hamstring strengthening activity and core. I mean, this is a really quite a solid core exercise.
Hmm.
And then you could do it with a lot. You can even do it with less weight and do single leg on this one as well.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Okay. Next one.
Okay, so you jumped
Oh,
all the way
oh,
to the end. Yep, a lateral lunge. A weighted lateral lunge. There's lots of ways to do this one. Some people do it with like a weighted pole. Some people do it with a barbell. Some people do it with a kettlebell. You could honestly, I do this as part of a run warm up as well, where I actually do it without weight, and just basically you're just transferring weight from side to side. And once again, now we're still working some of the your quadriceps and your glutes in the front and back plane, but we're also working side to side. So trying to once again get bang for our buck here.
and this is a good example of why you want someone who knows what they're doing, because you probably spend a lot of time on
Yeah,
training someone how far out to put this foot.
yeah. And it's a progression, right? Because there's many athletes, especially triathletes, that can't get that wide.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do if you actually can't? If you don't have the range of motion to actually do this? And actually, that's something that when we look at strength and conditioning, that I'm a big fan of, is doing exercises to actually increase my functional range of motion,
Mm-hmm.
rather than actually just than stretching. I would prefer to do something like this than actually stretch, for example, my groin.
I like it. Okay. Next one.
Okay, a couple of variations of a hamstring curl on a physio ball.
Mm-hmm.
These are super challenging. It's amazing though the amount of strength you can start to gain. Once again, this is our hamstrings. I think when we did our podcast last week with Stacy Sims, the first thing she said is posterior chain.
Mm-hmm.
And that is basically your hamstrings, your glutes, your back, and this kind of targets all of those. So you're just you bridge up, so it's kind of like that glute bridge, and then you're pulling your heels toward your butt, and then you progress to doing it single leg.
I like it. All right.
Okay, so the last two are more your traditional building of strength. I wouldn't necessarily contend that these are the greatest exercises for injury prevention, but these are better, in my opinion, for power.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a deadlift, very, very simple deadlift. You can Google this and you'll come up with 1,000 different deadlift videos. And this is once again really good for the glutes, the hamstrings. I like this one especially because if you look at the guy on the left, that to me looks an awful lot like being in the time trial position,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we're getting stronger being in that that hinged position. So I am a fan of this. And once again, you don't have to do it with the with a tremendous amount of weight, especially in the beginning. You can do this with a kettlebell. You can do it with dumbbells. The only thing I could say once again is work with a professional on this. This guy's got pretty dang good technique. Most of us don't have this kind of flexibility, and there are progressions you need to make to get to this kind of flexibility.
Good, good. All right. And this looks like the last one.
Yeah, and very simple, just a leg press.
Okay.
The reason I like this, and then once again, you can go to a single leg press as well on these machines, is there's a lot less chance of actual injury on something like this.
Mm.
The one advantage, and why I didn't put a bunch of machines in this is because I know a lot of people don't have gym memberships or whatever, but if you do, machines are a good way to still gain strength without increasing injury risk.
Okay.
You're taking a lot of variables out. And if you're thinking about your cycling and your running, there's some good evidence that leg press is a really safe way to gain strength. And I would contend that maybe even doing once again, it's single legged. So those are 8.
That's excellent. Okay. I am going to hit print. And I'm going to print these up.
All right. That's half the way to doing them.
That's right. Well, that's the article was barrier of knowledge, or
Yep.
barrier to strength training is knowledge. And so now I've got some strength training exercises. Some of those I can do just while I'm hanging out talking with the wife, and just just
Yep.
yeah, pull the physio ball out and do some things. So
And it's top secret, right? When I'm on a Zoom call with somebody and I turn my camera off, I go and hit up a few and turn the camera back on. Oh, I'm back. It's true.
that's good.
There's no time like the present to do
Yeah.
some of these things. And I know I already mentioned it, but especially in the beginning, really be cognizant of the load.
Hmm.
If you're gonna get into strength training, it's way, 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 way better to start out with low load and higher reps
Yep.
until you become very, very competent. Then slowly add the weight in, right? It's kind of like when you do a triathlon training program, we do progression, and we do slow progression keeps you healthy.
Hmm.
It's the same in the strength world. And I'm going to contend that triathletes are at a high risk of injuring themselves doing strength training because actually we're pretty strong. The things that we do on the bike, and we do running and we do swimming, actually have built up a lot of strength and strength endurance. So we have the ability to do a lot, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. I always go back to the story I tell my students about. This was a long time ago. A swimmer that I was working with, because she got a stress fracture, and she injured her shoulder, and her coach was like, well, you need to go run. And, well, how long do I run? Well, swim practice is an hour and a half. So basically the coach said, figure it out. So she ran for an hour and a half. Cardiovascularly, she could do it.
Yep.
But her bones were not ready for it. And she literally developed a stress fracture in one run.
Wow.
And just because as a triathlete you can do strength training doesn't mean you should just jump right into, okay, I need to do, max out and do, heavy lifts in the beginning. Build into the heavy lifts.
Yep.
That's my best advice I can give people.
The body responds, but you got to give it time.
You got to give it time. And I would also contend, if you're in a full-blown training cycle of triathlon, 2 times a week is plenty. And that's what that article showed, right? They saw the gains in 2 times a week, doing 3 or 4 exercises. That's it. You don't need to spend hours in the gym either, because if the barrier to entry is time, just fitting it in, especially if the barrier to entry is going to a gym, right? So now you got 20-minute drive. You got to get changed. You got to do this. You got to do that. And then next thing you know, it's like you're there for an hour. You got to drive home. And I contend most of these things you can do at home.
Yeah,
if you just do a few simple things. 6
of those were easy to do at home. And
yeah,
but at the same time, a lot of times the pool that you swim at is connected to a gym, and so just connect your swim and your strength training session. So
I'm a huge fan of that. And one of the reasons I'm a fan, especially of swimming and then going to do lower body exercise, is one of the things that ultimately happens when we do strength and conditioning is we get an increase in growth hormone. And let's say your upper body gets fatigued from swimming, and then you go and do lower body, you actually keep the stimulus going and get potentially more growth hormone release. So I think if you're gonna do strength training and you're doing a swim only one day, that's the day to do it. And oh yeah, don't do strength training on your off day. If your coach gives you, your plan says, hey, Friday's an off day. Oh, okay, I'll do my strength training. Then it's not an off day anymore. Like, we have to really remember that, because triathletes are crazy.
That's right. What's an off day?
An off day is my strength day. Yeah, perfect. I'll just, I'll do an hour and a half in the gym. That's my off day.
Well, this has been a great talk. We've really we've covered a lot of ground, from research to practical application.
Yeah, John, I really would love to, if I have the ability to see some of these student videos.
Oh yeah. I should make a library of them, and I'll pick out some of the good ones that were especially on the strength training. I'll shoot over to you.
Yeah, I'd love to see them, because this field, the research in this field, as you know, is evolving, right? That one study was a 2021 study.
Yep.
I think that it's an area, as triathlon becomes more and more popular around the world, I think we're going to see a lot more research in triathlon. And I think that this is an area that is ripe for research.
I know the Norwegians are connecting with a lot of research. So,
Yep. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, why are the Norwegians right now the best triathletes in the world on the men's side?
yeah, well, I'll say because of the research that they've been doing. They've actually been doing quite a bit on core temperature work. And
yeah, if you look at, if we take it maybe in the top 10 triathletes in the world, 3 of them are Norwegian from the same town.
yeah.
So what is it? Was it just because, Bergen is a beautiful place and it's not even a big place. I've been to Bergen. It's not a big place. And it's, they started using science and had a plan 8 years ago. And they're doing some crazy stuff with research and science. And, I'm a big fan of, obviously of that side of things. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I know they were doing a lot of work getting ready for Tokyo. And I almost went to Bergen because they had an airport there, and that's almost where my bike ended up. But
it's a beautiful place. We spent one night there several years ago. It's a beautiful place. But yeah,
cool. Awesome. Well, this has been great.
Yeah, thanks, John. A super great topic tonight. It definitely stretched me and my mind a little bit. No, it was really good. And I feel like now I need to hang up with you and just hit up 3 to 4 exercises.
I've printed them up.
All right. Awesome.
This is going downstairs, so this would be good.
Awesome. I'll be really, really interested to see if you end up implementing it, if you actually feel like there's a difference.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, John. Well, hey, have a great weekend. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow at the Ghost Bike ride.
Yeah. Let's dress warm and get down there.
Yep. Awesome. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.